was one of the most infamous and feared people to have lived. Criminal kingpin Pablo Escobar ran the world's biggest drug cartel until his death.
At the age of 24, our next guest found out that Escobar was in fact his biological dad. He had been completely unaware of this his whole life. He was rescued dramatically from Colombia as a baby, and his real father's attempts to kidnap him over the years.
Well, we're joined now by Pablo Escobar's son Roberto Sendoya Escobar, live from your home in Mallorca. Good morning to you.
Good morning. How are you?
Very well indeed. Absolutely sort of bowled over by this remarkable story, Roberto. I mean, you've written a book about your experiences. This is an autobiography of how you came to understand exactly who you were and who your father was. When you were growing up, did you ever have any suspicions that your father, as you knew him, your adoptive father, wasn't your real father?
Well, no. He was just dad and mum was mum. There were some strange things, like, you know, I was learning English and I spoke Spanish to the servants and the guards, and you know, I didn't really have able to communicate properly with my adopted parents for a while. So there were some strange things, but I didn't really know. I mean, when I was about 9, just they told me I was adopted, but I didn't even know what the word meant, so it didn't mean anything to me. They didn't tell me who my parents were or anything. So no, I just treated them as my parents.
It is just an unbelievably extraordinary story that's your real life. You're there, young lad, living with mum and dad. I mean, it's a big thing for people to take on that they're adopted. To then find out you're adopted by that your real father is such an infamous character. But the actual story of how you came to be with your adoptive parents is extraordinary too, because he was an agent, wasn't he?
Yes. Well, yes. I mean, we didn't know. I mean, he did disappear. You know, sometimes he wasn't at home for Christmas and things, but we just put it down to, you know, his business operations or whatever. But actually, it turns out that he's a Secret Service agent, and they're on operation to help the Americans track all this money that's disappearing out of America. And it's a sort of 20-odd-year operation, which culminates in, as in your piece just before we started, you know, the American agents, you know, eventually track him down. But the information that leads to all that and where the money is comes from this secret operation that started, you know, very early on in 1959. In fact, they went down to set that up. And it was just like a sort of Bond thing, you know. It's incredible.
And your adopted father told you when he was passing away, didn't he?
No, he told me, this was 1989, when Don Pablo Escobar Gaviria was, you know, running into trouble and had to go to this so-called prison, and he started losing control of his business. And so Dad decided to call me up and invite me over to Madrid and say, you know, tell me the story. And he started telling me these things. And of course, we didn't have internet, so I didn't know who Pablo Escobar was anyway. But he said, you know, this is the guy we used to meet in Madrid, you know, with all those sort of people around him and stuff. So the story started there. And, you know, 2 or 3 years it took for him to tell me the story properly. And it was many, many meetings and chats that we had, and actually it was a time where we got to know each other better, which was quite pleasant. And then in '93 he was dying from motor neurone disease, which is a tragic illness. And it's at that time when he tells me that, you know, he gives me a piece of paper. But in 1989, you know, in Madrid, he shows me this pile of money, which is, I describe it all in detail in the book. And then he tells me what this money was, and it turns out that for years and years and years, to infiltrate and gain this man's trust, he's been helping him tuck money away from his own family and cartel.
Goodness me! And that note that your father gave you when he was on his deathbed is a coded note to where there are some of Escobar's millions still out there, some of his jewels that he's sort of squirreled away, and that's your next challenge, is to try and decode the note and try and track these millions down.
Yeah, so I've been doing that for quite a while, as you can imagine, trying to work it all out. And I've got a long, long way down the road. You know, I've got some pretty good ideas, studying Dad's movements and his style and what he was doing, along with the code. And I realize now there's some Masonic connotations to this, because Dad was a Freemason. And you've got all these other things involved. And I've now been able to sort of work out quite a lot of it. I don't know exactly where everything is, but what I do know is that the cash I saw in Madrid is now no longer cash. It's now commodities, you know, bullion and that sort of thing. And it's in 4 or 5 different locations, and that's why there's 5 codes, lines of code in the piece of paper. But Dad didn't.
Can
I
you
don't
tell
think
us
Dad
the
intended
code?
me
We'd
to
all
have-
like to have a go at cracking it, I think. Or is
It's in
that
the book.
something
It's
you're
in the book.
guarding?
No, it's in the book.
It's in the book. So
The
it's
code's in the book. But the other things that I know about the code now, having looked at it and studied it for a long time, are going to be in the second book, called "The Secret of the Missing Millions."
now, so interestingly, Roberto, like it's an extraordinary story piecing together your previous life before you were adopted and taken to live with your adoptive parents, of course, and now it's a treasure hunt as well.
Yes, it is.
And much.
It is.
Have you watched Narcos? Have you watched the story on Netflix
Yes.
about Pablo Escobar, which
Yes.
I thought was an extraordinary exploration of his life? Obviously, it's been dramatised, but
Yes.
intercut with lots of news footage.
Yes, it's been Hollywoodized,
Yeah.
if you like. But, you know, obviously they do their thing, and you can't criticize them. They're professionals. They make a professional program, and that's that. But the reality is, of course, that my story is the prequel to Narcos. When Narcos starts, they just assume that there's this drug dealer. Whereas, in fact, what we all want to know, if you and you'll find out in the book, is how it all started. You know, they made this guy. He didn't, you know, he's just a school dropout. How does a school dropout, you know, gangster become, you know, the world's richest man or whatever? You know, he needed help and he got help. And this is what this book's about. It's the prequel.